So for this afternoon, we'll be talking about ethical issues at the end of life. And teka muna ha, I will record our lecture for the sake of attendance and everything. Just a minute. Balik natin. Ganon. Ha? So for this afternoon, we'll be talking about ethical issues in care for the seriously ill and the dying. And this is our topic outline. In the first place, we have to establish that we affirm that every human being has his or her inherent dignity. This is not correlated with their capabilities. No? Even if they are seemingly in a vegetative state, no, although we use the term vegetative, they have not lost their human dignity in all its fullness. So even if they're seriously ill or disabled, they continue to be human beings with their own dignity. We have to affirm as well that every human being has a right to life, which means that from natural law, any action that directly and intentionally kills an innocent person is an unjust taking of a human life. So this right to life is from womb to tomb. No? So in other words, we have to protect the rights of the fetus, of the embryo, all the way to the right of the elderly, those who are no longer mentally competent, because of their age or because of their medical condition. So everybody has the right to life, but nobody has the right to die. They are two different things, because when you talk about a right, it comes with certain duties and responsibilities on the part of other people. No? So we all have a right to life, but we do not have the right to die. At the same time, while we may have our human life, we know that we did not give life to ourselves. In the first place, we were born of our natural parents, of our biological parents. But ultimately, it's not even our parents who created us. No? They simply played the role of procreation. No? Ultimately, we all came from a creator, whether you are a believer or you're a religious or not. No? So you know that you did not give life to yourself. And we owe it to the creator of our life to really be good stewards of our life. That means we have to take care of our life, we have to take care of our health, we have to take care of ourselves, and we also have to love ourselves, because the creator loves us, with an unconditional love. So we also have to love ourselves. It's not, egoism to say we love ourselves. Loving ourselves is different from self-love. So that one is kind of narcissistic kind of relationship with yourself. Loving yourself because you have to take care of yourself, because you owe it to the creator to take care of yourself. You are merely a steward, and you will have to account for your stewardship. Now, the task of medicine, of doctors, nurses, and everybody else in the allied health professions is to care even when we cannot cure. So we should not feel ourselves a failure just because our patients are dying, because there are certain illnesses that even if we tried our best, we gave them the best of care, they will still end up dying. So, but you have become a good doctor or a nurse or allied health professional if you did your best and you continue to care even if you can no longer cure. Now, we talk about the role of the family and palliative and hospice care. By the way, I am Dr. Liza Manalo. I'm a palliative care specialist. From family medicine, you are aware of the fact that the family is central to the care of the patient, no matter what illness they may have. We know that either the family will help support the patient in her illness, or on the other hand, perhaps the family is the cause of the patient's illness. It depends on the circumstances of the sick person. But the family's presence sustains the patient, and their love represents an essential therapeutic factor in the care of the sick. We are familiar with this. When we were little and we hurt ourselves, we sustained a wound, we ran crying to our mom or our dad, And then we show them our wound and it's bleeding and they put Band-Aid and then they will just blow on the wound and they will say, oh, it's no longer painful, stop crying already. And then when they tell us to stop crying already, we stop crying because we believe them. No? So how important is the role of the family in providing even therapeutic advantages to the care of the sick and the dying? So that's why we bank on their presence, even at the bedside. Now, when we're doing our rounds, we expect the family members to be around. What is palliative care? And I would like to take advantage of our session today to really clarify certain misperceptions that you may have or certain errors that you may have regarding hospice and palliative care. So palliative care is none other than an approach to care that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing the problems associated with life-threatening illness through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, physical, psychosocial, and spiritual. So based on this definition, you might say there's nothing scary or threatening about being referred to palliative care. Who among our patients would not want quality of life? I think all patients want quality of life. Who among our patients would not want to prevent and relieve suffering? I think all patients want prevention and relief of suffering. Who wants holistic care of their pain? No, which includes physical, psychosocial, and spiritual pain or spiritual distress. No, everybody wants this kind of holistic treatment of pain. No? So that's why it always puzzles me when people have the misperception about palliative care, because they usually associate palliative care with end-of-life care or the care of the dying. And that is really and truly a myth and a misperception. No? So bottom line, palliative care is caring for the mind, body, and spirit of somebody who's suffering from a serious illness. You don't have to be dying to be referred to palliative care. So what is the goal? To anticipate, prevent, and reduce suffering and to support the best possible quality of life for patients, families, and caregivers, regardless of the stage of the disease and the need for other therapies. So meaning you may have been diagnosed with stage 1 cancer and you are already being referred to palliative care, and that's the way it should be. You are going to still have your surgery, your chemotherapy, and radiotherapy, and you're already being referred to palliative care, and that's the way it should be, because our role is to anticipate all the complications and the side effect of your anti-cancer treatments. So surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy has side effects. So we are going to address all those side effects: pain, nausea and vomiting, lack of appetite, constipation, diarrhea, edema, insomnia, everything and anything that comes with a serious illness. We are supposed to help with that. That's why we say we provide symptom control, disease management, and psychosocial care, as well as spiritual care. No, so that's why earlier I mentioned that palliative care is holistic, no? Because somebody suffering from a serious illness like advanced cancer or in other countries, they refer advanced PTB patients, HIV patients, those with neurologic conditions like ALS, no, and MBS, no, so those with end-stage heart disease, end-stage pulmonary disease like COPD, end-stage kidney disease, no, those on dialysis and they no longer want dialysis, no, all these patients are our patients, no? And we help them with their physical problems, which are often multiple. We also do counseling for their anxiety, anger, and depression. And we work hand in hand with mental health professionals, the psychiatrists, if necessary. But if it's a natural reaction to a serious illness, then we can take care of those primary problems of anxiety, anger, and depression. The patients could be suffering also from interpersonal problems like loneliness, financial toxicity, and family tensions. And especially at the end of life, patients might be suffering from their inability to accept approaching death. They could be suffering from a sense of hopelessness and a desperate search for meaning. Again, through counseling, we try to help them with these issues. No? So we talk about total pain control. So the difference between a palliative care specialist and a pain specialist is that pain specialist addresses only the physical problems, whereas we in palliative care addresses all the other aspects of pain, social, psychological, and spiritual. Okay, so there is a distinction between palliative care and hospice care. So hospice care is under palliative care, but not all palliative care is hospice care, no? Because when you talk about hospice care, you are talking about seriously ill patients who have been prognosticated to have only 6 months or less to live, no? So their illness is really very advanced, and the doctors know that the patient is dying in 6 months' time or even less. You know? So, but other than that, everything else is the same. The kind of care we provide for hospice patients and palliative care patients are the same. No? The holistic care of the individual, no? But this time, all the way to end of life care. In other countries, there are hospice facilities, meaning instead of bringing a terminally ill patient to a hospital, they admit the patient to a hospice facility. But that means the patient knows he's dying and he only wants comfort care. He does not want any more aggressive diagnostics and therapeutic measures to keep him alive. So that's what we mean by a hospice care. In our country, we don't really have hospice facilities. We may have inpatient hospices, meaning the patient is still admitted in the hospital and we see them as when they are admitted in the hospital. Okay, so our role, regardless of your chosen specialization later on, is to offer appropriate information and spiritual support. Okay, so you know that one of the principles of bioethics is veracity, truthfulness. No, we cannot lie to our patients. We cannot deceive the patient. So it's the patient's right to know the whole truth about his illness. So if he is terminally ill and dying, then he needs to know that he is terminally ill and dying. In the Philippine setting, I would like you to put some things in the chat box if you want, if you have some questions, some clarifications, some personal experiences about the things I'm mentioning, no? And feel free to actually speak up as I continue my lecture, no? I wish you to be very, very participative in this session. Okay. So as I was saying, in the Philippine setting, the family has fears that if you tell the truth that the patient has a limited lifespan, like only 6 months to live, then they will have some anxiety and depression, or they would say, lalo pang mapapabilis, baka lang lalo pang mamatay, o kaya naman baka magpakamatay pag nalaman niya yung katotohanan na mamamatay na pala siya in 6 months' time, no? But in the first place, it's their life. We said it. It's stewardship of life. It's their death. It's their body. It's their health. And they have all the right to prepare for their future. And this is really eternal future. No, we're not just talking about future in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, 50 years' time. No, you're talking about eternity. And who doesn't want to prepare for eternity? Wala nang balikan yon. That's forever. No? Yan lang ang totoo, forever. So, and therefore, especially if they are practicing a religion, a Christian religion, they're Catholics, maybe they want to receive the sacraments, maybe they want to go to confession, to receive communion, to receive anointing of the sick, or for the other Christians, no, they want to call their spiritual pastors, then they will not ask for those unless they know how seriously ill they are. No? So we have to not lie. Maybe we did not tell them the whole truth at once. So pwede namang dahan-dahan, pwedeng pa konti-konti, walang problema. Pero always aim at full disclosure later on. Of course, you have to establish a rapport. You have to gain the trust and confidence of your patients. But the moment they trust you enough and they know that you only want what is best for them, then share the truth about their prognosis. Now, that's ultimately our aim, to go for full disclosure, not only of diagnosis, but also of prognosis. I hope this is very clear, no? But in the process, actually, to be honest, in the Philippine setting, I find it very easy to practice palliative care because our people, our patients, are very, very spiritual. Magugulat kayo pa ang matututo sa mga pasyente natin when it comes to preparation for death. No? Sobrang madasalin, sobrang laging nagro-rosaryo, mga daily mass goers yung ibang pasyente natin. So pag sinabi mong, Mami, medyo kailangan na po natin maghanda-handa kasi po hindi natin malalaman kung kailan tayo haharap sa Diyos, no? Sabihin, ay naku, doktora, ready na po ako. Ganyan. So of course, that's very good news for you, no? Na hindi para mahirap kausapin ng pasyente about death and dying, no? That has been my experience. That's why for me to disclose the bad news of death and dying is not so difficult to do here in the Philippines scenario. Okay? So because the reason why we're practicing full disclosure is because we have to offer them all the choices that are possible as far as end-of-life care is concerned. They want to be aggressive, or maybe they don't want to be aggressive about life support measures. No, maybe they just want comfort measures only. And they have the right to make that choice. Kasi yung iba, ayaw namang magpa-intubate. Pero since hindi naman nila alam na dying nila, na sila, at hindi nyo naman sinabi sa kanila na pwede pala silang ma-intubate, ma-intubate na lang bigla nang hindi man lang pinag-usapan. And I think that's very unethical na you do things without first securing the patient's informed decision and consent about those procedures. Okay, so as I said, when we practice truth-telling, no, we, in the end, are respectful of patients' autonomy, and we want them to actively participate in their decision-making. Sila ang mamimili kung anong klaseng gamutan ang gagawin natin sa kanila. Sila magsasabi sa atin kung gusto nila magpa-intubate, kung gusto nila mag-CPR, kung gusto nila magpa-dialysis. Sila lahat, hindi tayo ang magdidikta sa kanila. Hindi din ang pamilya nila ang magdidikta sa kanila kung anong klaseng care ang gusto nila. Sandali lang, lobat ang aking laptop. Okay. We have to be respectful of the values, preferences, and wishes of the patient more than their family. Now, we have what we call an advance directives. These are legal documents that describe the patient's wishes regarding care in the event that they are unable to communicate, and they designate a substitute decision maker to make decisions that are not expressed in the advance directives. No? So again, they can only draft their advance directives if you have told them the truth that they are terminally ill and dying. In particular, physicians should discuss the patient's wishes regarding the approach to life-sustaining interventions, as well as palliative measures that might have the additional effect of accelerating death. Whenever possible, the patient substitute decision maker should be included in these conversations. So minsan, pagka nagpapakonsulta sa inyo ang pasyente sa outpatient, mas maganda, lagi silang sinasamahan ng family members nila. So kung mga matatanda yan, kasama sana yung anak, hindi lang yung apo, kasi in the end, dapat lahat ng usapan nyo with the patient naririnig ng nearest of kin. Because when they know at narinig nila mula sa pasyente mismo yung gusto niya, then it's easier for that surrogate decision maker to make decisions on behalf of the patient kung hindi na kayang magdesisyon ng pasyente. No? So lagi yung hahanapin pag nagpapakonsulta ang mga pasyente nyo, sino po ba ang mga anak nyo, sino ang panganay, pwede po bang pupunta dito para po pag kinakausap ko kayo, narinig yung usapan natin. Okay, so this is the hierarchy of who can be the surrogate decision makers, those who can make decisions on behalf of the patient. So normally, it's the legal guardian with the healthcare decision-making authority or an individual given the durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions. In the Philippine scenario, bihirang-bihira sa mga pasyente natin ang mga legal guardian at saka may durable power of the attorney. So in the end, what we follow is that the first who can make decisions for the patient will be the spouse if they're married, the adult children of the patient, preferably all of them are in agreement. And then kung pediatric naman, obviously the parents of the patient, or the adult siblings of the patient, preferably also they are in agreement. If they are not all in agreement, walang consensus, at least majority decision ng mga magkakapatid, no, o ng mga anak. Okay? So, kasi minsan hindi talaga magkasundo-sundo ang pamilya. So kung anong dapat gawin sa mga magulang nila o sa anak nila. Okay. So far, I have been talking to you about the ethical things. Now, I have to clarify to you the unethical things. No? Baka mamaya nagkakapalit-palit na kayo. No? So, we talk about euthanasia and assisted suicide. Okay? So, euthanasia by definition is an act or omission which of itself or by intention causes death in order to eliminate suffering. So, bottom line, ito yung eliminating suffering by eliminating the sufferer. Okay, para matigil na ang hirap ng pasyente, tapusin na lang natin lahat-lahat, no? So, this constitutes a murder gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and to the respect due to the living God, his creator. The death caused by euthanasia is not part of the natural process of dying of a terminally ill person. Kahit sabihin mong bukas mamamatay na siya, tapos ngayon euthanasia nyo siya, euthanasia pa rin yun. No, kumbaga, bukas pa siya mamamatay, hindi ngayon. Inunahan niyo pa rin ang pagkamatay ng natural death. So whatever its motives and means, direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to the lives of handicapped, sick, or dying persons, and this will always be unethical. Kahit sabihin mong in other countries, euthanasia has been legalized in the Netherlands, in some states of the US, in Canada, in Australia, no? So even if it's been legalized in those areas, they continue to be unethical. Alam nyo naman yon, hindi necessarily na lahat ng legal ay ethical. Okay? So, we make a distinction between euthanasia and assisted suicide. So, euthanasia is killing on request and is defined as a doctor intentionally killing a person by the administration of drugs at that person's voluntary and competent request. Whereas physician-assisted suicide is defined as a doctor intentionally helping a person to commit suicide by providing drugs for self-administration at that person's voluntary and competent request. So I want to emphasize that for both euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, the patient wants it, he wishes to be killed, he wishes to die, no? And he asks for it. So, kasi pagka hindi alam ng pasyente at hindi niya gusto yung pagkamatay niya, that's not euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide. That's really murder, first-degree murder. So, sa euthanasia at saka physician-assisted suicide, the patient wants and the patient is requesting for it. Okay? So, yung isa, you're the one who's going to administer the lethal injection. Yung sa pangalawa, bibigyan mo lang siya ng prescription, siya yung bibili ng gamot, tapos siya din na mag-administer ng gamot sa sarili niya. Kaya nga suicide. Okay? The World Medical Association condemns as unethical both euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. Again, I want to emphasize that the World Medical Association condemns these two actions as unethical. Kaya talaga magtataka ka na bakit sa ibang countries, they have legalized euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. In fact, may reimbursement pa nga ata sa Medicaid nila. No, covered siya ng Medicaid. Okay, so medyo malabo, pero I'm clarifying this because some of you might choose to train in other countries and even practice in other countries, no? It may be legal, but it is not and will continue to be unethical. Okay? So when a request for euthanasia arises from anguish and despair of the patient, although in these cases, the guilt of the individual may be reduced or completely absent, nevertheless, the error of judgment into which the conscience falls, perhaps in good faith, does not change the nature of this act of killing, which will always be in itself something to be rejected. So in other words, kahit sabihin mo na sobrang hirap na kasi yung pasyente, kaya tuloy gusto na niyang mamatay, syempre, kung may kasamang depression, kung may kasamang anxiety, mapabawasan yung guilt ng pasyente sa ginagawa niya, di ba? Pero it still continues to be something unethical, and for Christians, for Catholics, it continues to be a sin. Not to kill yourself or to ask somebody else to kill you, it continues to be a sin. Hindi magbabago yung guilt na yon, no? So And for us doctors, when we participate in euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, such actions are never a real service to the patient, but rather a help to die. So kung sa tingin nyo, tinutulungan nyo yung pasyente, sobrang naaawa na kayo sa pasyente, no? Nagmamakaawa na yung pasyente, in reality, hindi tulong yung ginagawa nyo. No matter what you want to call it, even if it's called mercy killing, that's not what real mercy is all about. When you talk about being really merciful, you want your patient to go to heaven. No? Gusto nyo makarating sa langit ang mga pasyente ninyo. Pag nagpakatmatay yung pasyente nyo, pag tinulungan yung kayo yung pumatay ng pasyente nyo, saan pupulutin yung pasyente nyo, di ba? So, because he is offending, committing a sin against the Creator. That Creator, only the Creator has the right to give us life and has the right to take away our life at the time he sees best. So in his own goodwill and in his wisdom, he knows the best time to take us already because we're ready. No, not because we are despairing, because we are suffering too much. Okay? I hope this is very, very clear. Kahit nasaan pa kayo mag-practice, no? You are not helping your patients when you participate in euthanasia and assisted suicide. Okay. In my own practice as a palliative care specialist, I have had patients requesting for a hastened death. No? Doc, gusto ko nang mamatay, gusto ko nang mabilis ang pagkamatay ko. No? So what do you do when patients request you for a hastened death? Intensify palliative care, which is comfort measures to relieve that pain, relieve that suffering, provide psychosocial support, provide spiritual care. No? That's what they need. They don't need to be helped to die. They need to be helped to suffer, but minimize that suffering, whatever it takes. No? Kailangan matulungan nating mabawasan yung paghihirap nila, yung pain nila. And that's what we try to do in palliative care. So, of course, we are using strong opioids. We are using benzodiazepines in order to relieve pain and suffering and breathlessness and anxiety of our patients, no? So, and it's possible. But, of course, there's always that danger that because you are using strong, potent opioids, potent benzodiazepines, that in the process, you may, quote-unquote, shorten the life of a terminally ill patient. In my own personal experience, this has never happened. No, na napabilis ang pagkamatay ng pasyente dahil lang sa gumamit ka ng strong opioids or dahil lang sa gumamit ka ng benzodiazepines, no? In fact, my personal experience is pag nabawasan mo ang pain at breathlessness ng pasyente mo, humahaba pa nga ang buhay nila. Kasi nagkakaroon sila ng will to live eh. Kasi when they're suffering too much, they want to die na talaga. They will themselves to die already. Kulang na lang talaga magbigti yung mga yan sa sobrang hirap na pinagdadaanan nila. Pero pag natanggal mo yung pain and suffering nila, pag nag-rounds ka kinabukasan, ngiting-ngiti yan, kumakain, masaya-masaya, at gustong-gustong mabuhay. So this is my own personal experience. Instead of painkillers shortening the life of a terminally ill patient, when I relieve their pain, because I use strong opioids at the proper dose, no, starting low, going slowly, in titrating the doses so that their pain is relieved, their life is actually prolonged. No, mas gusto nilang mabuhay pagka wala na silang pain and suffering. Sino ba naman talaga ang gustong mamatay, no? So, on the other hand, kung talagang nagawa na natin lahat and the patient continues to suffer, well, we try to relieve their pain medically, psychosocially, but maybe you really have to provide a lot of spiritual care for your patients so that they learn to appreciate the Christian understanding of redemptive suffering na may meaning yung pinagdadaanan nilang hirap. Just 2 days ago, that's what precisely my patient was asking me, Doktora, ano ba talaga ang meaning nitong lahat ng ito? Tinatanong ko kasi God. In fact, may tampo ako sa Diyos, nagagalit ako sa Diyos, no? Bakit niya ako pinagkakaganito, no? And then that's when you really have to help them come to terms with their life choices, no? So many times sila yung may kagagawan kung bakit sila nagkasakit, no? Inabuso nila yung katawan nila, hindi nila inilagaan ang katawan nila, may bisyo pa sila, nagpaka-stress ng todo-todo, tapos pagka may sakit na sila, si God ang may kasalanan, no? So we have to help them understand, no, that ultimately the reason why they got sick is because of their choices. They were not taking care of their health. They're not taking care of their diet. They're not taking care of their sleep. They're not exercising. No? So, kumbaga, yun na nga, yung they're burning the candles at both ends and then they expect to live a normal life, a normal lifespan, sobra namang gastado na yung katawan nila sa lahat ng pinagagawa nila sa buhay nila. Okay, so I want to clarify this difference and distinction between palliative sedation, which is ethical, versus euthanasia, which is unethical. In palliative sedation, by the use of the word palliative, that means your aim is comfort, no? Para maibsan ang paghihirap ng pasyente nyo. So when you give them a sedative, pampatulog, no? The intention is to relieve intolerable suffering, and the procedure is to use a sedating drug for symptom control. Kasi in pain, they're breathless, they're so anxious, nagwawala, no? So that's why you're giving them a sedative drug. And the successful outcome is the alleviation of distress. Okay? So nakatulog ng maayos, no, nakapagpahinga ng maayos, versus euthanasia. In euthanasia, the intention is to kill the patient. The procedure is to administer a lethal drug. So sa euthanasia, they're not giving sedatives, they're not giving opioids. Ang ginagamit nila sa euthanasia ay potassium chloride. So potassium chloride will cause a fatal arrhythmia. So mag-heart attack ang pasyente mo kasi nagkaroon siya ng fatal arrhythmia. So yung heart attack na yon is enough to kill them. So kaya nga the successful outcome is immediate death. So obviously magkaiba ang palliative sedation and euthanasia. So therefore, you should not be scared to offer palliative sedation to patients in distress kasi hindi mo naman sila ino-offera ng euthanasia. Magkaiba sila. Okay, how about food and water? Obviously, you are obliged to provide food and water to our patients insofar as and until this demonstrably attains the purpose of providing hydration and nutrition for the patient. Obviously, dapat pakainin, dapat painumin lahat ng pasyente kung ang purpose ay magbigay ng sustenance and to hydrate, right? It is obligatory, no? Even if you have to give your nutrition and hydration through artificial means like an NGT. Kasi kahit naman gaano kahirap ng pasyente, afford pa rin naman nilang bumili ng NGT at as long as marunong kang mag-insert ng NGT at magpakain through NGT, no? Safe namang gumamit ng NGT sa lahat ng pasyente kahit na gaano sila kahirap at kahit na gaano nga kahirap na sumasala sa pagkain ng pamilya, kahit papano, kahit na i-austerize mo lang kung ano man yung pagkain nila sa table, pwede na yon kung hindi nila afford magbumili ng mga expensive oral nutritional supplements like Ensure. So, kung ano man yung kinakain nila sa bahay, yun yung i-austerize, i-blender, and then yun na ipapasok sa NGT. Okay? So, you can give nutrition and hydration artificially provided it does not cause harm or intolerable suffering to your patients. So, okay lang mag-NGT feeding as long as hindi magkakaroon ng aspiration pneumonia ang pasyente nyo or nadadigest niya ng maayos yung pinapakain nyo. Hindi sumasakit ng tiyan niya o nagtatayo siya dahil sa mga pinapakain nyo. Okay. So, and this obligatory nutrition and hydration applies even to our patients in persistent vegetative state. Of course, kung talagang persistent vegetative state yan, hindi lang NGT ang ikakabit sa kanila. Usually nga, PEG na para mas permanent, no? Percutaneous endoscopically inserted gastrostomy tube. Okay, so kasi nga mahaba ang pag-aalaga pagka ang pasyente natin nasa persistent vegetative state. And aside from providing obligatory nutrition and hydration, we have to keep them clean, provide warmth, and prevent bed sores, etc. Okay, but you may withhold or withdraw artificial hydration or nutrition in certain cases. So, there are certain cases na ethical, allowed to withhold or withdraw artificial hydration or nutrition when they have a limited ability to prolong life or to provide comfort, or when they would be excessively burdensome for the patient or would cause significant physical discomfort. For example, resulting for complications in the use of the means employed. So for example, nagkakaroon na ng infection dahil dun sa artificial nutrition, no? Nagsisepsis pa nga yung iba dahil sa artificial nutrition, then obviously you stop, no? Kasi hindi matapos-tapos na nag-i-infect kasi nga yung mga total parenteral nutrition na yan, yung pagkain sa swero, paboritong-paborito din yan ng mikrobyo. So, lagi naglalagnat yung pasyente at in fact, some of them go into sepsis. So, if you have identified that it's the total parenteral nutrition that is causing the infection, then obviously you have to stop it, no? So, as the patient draws close to inevitable death from the underlying progressive and fetal condition, artificial nutrition and hydration are no longer beneficial to the patient because the patient cannot absorb or metabolize them. Kaya nga ang mga nurses, lagi nilang tine-check yung residual volume. Kung bago nila i-feed yung pasyente ngayon, titingnan muna nila ilan pa ang nasa stomach ng pasyente. Pag more than 50 ml pa yon, then hindi muna sila mag-feed kasi nga hindi na uubos yung binigay na previous feeding sa pasyente. Baka lang mag-aspirate at mag-aspiration pneumonia or sumakit yung tiyan ng pasyente kasi nga feed kayo ng feed, hindi naman na-absorb, hindi naman metabolize. You have been so quiet. Are things very clear to you? As I said, feel free to write your questions and comments in the chat box. Okay. How about aggressive medical treatment? When death is imminent, so malapit nang mamatay yung pasyente, and without interruption of the normal care the patient requires in such cases, it is lawful, according to science and conscience, to renounce treatments that provide only a precarious and painful extension of life. So in other words, kung obvious naman na dying at pinoprolong nyo lang unnecessarily yung dying process, then pwede nang itigil ang extraordinary means of life support. Okay? How do you know kung extraordinary means or ordinary means of life support sila? You have to weigh. No? When the benefits outweigh the burden, so that means mas nagpe-predominate yung benefits, these are what we call ordinary means of life support, proportionate means of life support, and that means these are obligatory. No? Kasi beneficial siya eh. No? Proportionate pa siya sa gamutan ng pasyente. So these are ordinary means of life support and therefore obligatory. On the other hand, if the burdens already outweigh the benefits, these are what we call extraordinary means of life support or disproportionate means of life support. And because the harm already outweighs the good, then they already become extraordinary and therefore not obligatory anymore. So pagka hindi na obligatory, pwede na siyang itigil or tanggalin. Okay, so I hope this is very, very clear. If the benefits outweigh the burden, then give it because these are proportionate means. When the burdens outweigh the benefit, these are disproportionate means and therefore, kung gusto ng pasyente o ng pamilya to withhold or withdraw these extraordinary means of life support or the disproportionate means of life support, then go ahead. Walang kasalanan sa Diyos sa ginagawa nyo kung burdensome na talaga and futile yung gamutan. Okay, so extraordinary means usually refer to highly specialized, physically difficult, psychologically draining, or very expensive measures used in order to delay the imminent death and prolong the life of a dying patient. These extraordinary means no longer correspond to the real situation of the patient, either because they are now disproportionate to any expected results or because they impose an excessive burden on the patient and the family. So discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome is ethical. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. Here, one does not will to cause death. Rather, one's inability to impede death is merely accepted. So tinatanggal lang natin na talagang mamatay na yung pasyente at hindi na natin pinipigilan yung natural death ng pasyente. The decision should be made by the patient if he is competent and able, or if not, by those legally entitled to act for the patient, whose reasonable will and legitimate interest must always be respected. So in other words, pwede mag-decision yung surrogate decision maker to forgo extraordinary means of life support and allow natural death. And okay lang yun. Okay. So usually, bago naman tayo mag-propose ng withholding or withdrawal of life-sustaining measures, we tell the family that we want to try first the treatment and evaluate its clinical effectiveness after a given amount of time. So okay, nag-IV antibiotics tayo, o nagbigay tayo ng 1 week, 2 weeks, hindi talaga gumagaling, nag-step up na tayo, hindi pa rin gumagaling, no? So hindi naman po pwedeng forever and ever lagi na lang naka-antibiotics. So we will evaluate its clinical effectiveness after a given amount of time. And then confirm that if the intervention has not achieved the agreed on goals, it may be withdrawn. No? So kahit nabigay ka na ng bigay ng antibiotics, hindi matapos-tapos na infection, tapos lumalala pa rin yung pasyente, then you say, pwede na po natin itigil yung antibiotics kasi po parang hindi naman po tumatalab sa pasyente natin. Okay, how about the removal of the ventilator? Okay, so obviously we usually give the oxygen via nasal cannula or a face mask. You know? So this is a very light burden intervention and it's all right. But sometimes the patient breathlessness is so severe that they will be needing to be intubated and attached to a mechanical ventilator. And oxygen provided by a ventilator represents a much greater burden of care because of the physical discomfort of the endotracheal tube going from the mouth, traversing the oropharynx, and crossing the larynx and reaching trachea. So you may also have to give sedatives, analgesics, and physical restraints to hold the patient still. No? And of course, if the patient is intubated, the patient cannot talk. And the ventilator exposes the patient to greater risk of infection and viral trauma. So as such, after convening the family members say na hindi na nakakatulong ang ventilator, gusto na po namin tanggalin, yan po yung gusto naman ng pasyente namin, ayaw siyang kabitan ng ventilator, then you may consider ventilator withdrawal and there's a protocol for it. Okay, so it says here, first and foremost, establish that further aggressive medical care is incapable of meeting the desired goals of care. Okay. So the goal of withdrawing life-sustaining treatment is to remove unwanted treatments rather than to hasten death. So pag tinigil na natin yung ibang gamutan, hindi ibig sabihin natin doon pinabibilis natin ang pagkamatay ng tao. Ang sinasabi lang namin, yung treatment na yan, hindi na effective, ayaw na ng pasyente. So itigil na lang natin. Okay, so obviously, again, here, we are allowing the patient to exercise their autonomy. Although the attending physician must take ultimate responsibility for the decision, it would be imprudent to insist on a plan of care in the face of persistent, thoughtful disagreement by members of the healthcare team. So normally, mas maganda, kamit mo yung buong pamilya as you plan the care that the patient will be receiving. Okay, some family members feel guilty about ventilator withdrawal, pero you just have to calm them down na wala po tayong dapat ikasisi. Hindi naman po tayo yung pumapatay sa pasyente. Ang pumapatay po sa kanya, yung talagang sakit niya. Kaya lang, pinaprolong lang po natin yung suffering niya sa pagkukontinue ng medical ventilator na wala naman po tayong tinatanong na improvement. Okay? So it's important to provide a multidisciplinary approach to care. Okay, so pag nagtanggal ng ventilator, basically tatlo lang ang pwedeng mangyari. Either there will be a rapid death within 30 minutes, or they will die within hours to days, or on the other hand, pwede palang stable naman ang puso. So because of that, balik siya sa hospital kung saan siya galing at ituloy lang yung gamutan. Okay? So, when you are contemplating or suggesting to your patients to withdraw life-sustaining treatment, obviously, you have to employ the principles of informed consent. So like other medical procedures, withdrawal of life support should be accompanied by informed consent or at least assent and documentation of this process in the medical record. It is not just the signing of a consent form. Dapat naiintindihan ng mga kamag-anak kung anong pinipirmahan nila. It refers to a process of communication between healthcare team, patient, and options patient and families that focuses on the burden and benefits of life-sustaining treatment and the options for alternative care. Okay, so informed consent. So surrogate decision maker, a power of attorney or surrogate is obliged to choose what they think the patient would have wanted, even if it conflicts with what they themselves would want. So kahit na against ka sa gusto ng pasyente, as long as hindi naman kasalanan yung ginagawa mo sa Diyos, then normally we respect their decision. Okay? So medical procedure as a withdrawal, ventilator withdrawal is a medical procedure. Okay? So, dapat nakasulat yan sa chart. And then the attending physician must take responsibility for the decision to withdraw ventilator support and for its humane and skillful resolution. So, dapat lahat ng doktor, especially the attending physician, should know how to perform ventilator withdrawal. Of course, pag nagtanggal ka ng ventilator, may iba pang symptoms na nakikita sa pasyente, usually breathlessness, at saka yung noisy breathing. So, you give the necessary drugs for this. Okay, so you have some questions? Meron ba kayong mga katanungan? Ang tahitahimik ninyo?
None so far po.
Sige. So, actually, we move on to the World Medical Association Declaration of Venice on terminal illness. So, as I said, the World Medical Association has spoken as far as terminal illness is concerned. So, the duty of physicians is to heal, where possible, to relieve suffering and to protect the best interests of their patients. In the care of terminal patients, the primary responsibilities of the physician are to assist the patient in maintaining an optimal quality of life through controlling symptoms and addressing social needs, and to enable the patient to die with dignity and in comfort. Okay. So the patient's right to autonomy in decision-making must be respected with regards to decision in the terminal phase life. Hindi tayo pabor sa pag-refuse niya ng treatment. Kung he did the refusal of treatment with full knowledge and full consent, then we respect that choice. Okay? Physicians are ethically prohibited from actively assisting patients in suicide. The physician must not employ any means that would provide no benefit for the patient. This is what we call futile measures, patients to develop written advance directives. Physicians should endeavor to understand and address the psychosocial needs of the patients. Okay? So help them deal with anxiety, fear, and grief. The clinical management of pain in terminal patients is of paramount importance in terms of alleviating suffering. So, bago nyo ayusin yung ibang symptoms ng pasyente, ayusin mo muna yung pain niya. So, all people have the right to high-quality, scientifically based and humane health care. Therefore, appropriate end-of-life medical care must be considered a privilege, not a privilege, but a true right, independent of age or any other associated factors. Okay. Palliative care at the end of life is part of good medical care. The physician must adopt an attitude to suffering that is compassionate and humane and act with empathy, respect, and tact. Okay, so ang daming tawag dito, characteristic ng care na dapat binibigay natin sa end of life, no? Compassionate, humane, and with empathy, respect, and tact. Okay, so basically, that's the last slide. Unless you have some questions, tahitahimik ninyo. Ayan, there's a chat. Doc, what shall we do if we have an unconscious patient who has attempted suicide, and then there is the do not resuscitate tattoo in his arm? Well, nangyari na nga yan, no? So, Kung yung pasyenteng yon ay hindi depressed at nasa tamang pag-iisip at yung pagpapatato niya ng do not resuscitate ay nasa tamang pag-iisip niya ginawa, then we have to be respectful of the choice of the patient. Yun yung reality na sinasabi kong right of the patient to refuse treatment even if personally we totally disagree. Gusto pa natin siyang tulungan. No? So here really they are exercising their autonomy 100%. Okay. So, but we can keep him comfortable. Maybe we will not resuscitate the patient, but we can keep them we can help them have a dignified death. Okay. Any other concern? Ano naman yan pang ano ba yun? Pang pelikula naman yan, tanong mo. Sa totoo lang, minsan lang nangyari yan, no? So, meaning in day-to-day practice, that is not common. Nagpapatato, lalo na sa Pilipinas, no? Follow up lang sa DNR question, i-respect pa rin po ba yung autonomy kahit tattoo lang po instead of a medical order? Well, obviously, it has to be converted into a medical order. So the nearest of kin will have to be talked to at precisely kakausapin nga natin ay may tattoo po yung pamilya, yung pasyente natin na ayaw niya po magpa-resuscitate. Ano po bang dapat natin gawin? Kasi po normally, pagka po nasa tamang pag-iisip ang pasyente natin nung nagpatattoo siya at yan talaga ang gusto niya, we have to respect that. Pero kayo po ba, ano sa tingin nyo, nasa tama po ba siya pag-iisip nung nagpatattoo po ba niya siya? Kasi kung may doubt na he was in his right frame of mind, then you're not supposed to obey that. No? Kung medyo nasisiraan ang ulo yung pasyente nung ginawa niya yon. No? So, yeah, you're correct. You just don't obey the tattoo. The tattoo has to be converted into a medical order. So in this case, mas maganda makipag-usap ka ng masinsinan sa nearest of kin kasi in the end, sila naman talaga ang dapat mag-desisyon more than us. Okay? So kaya nga importante yung truth-telling, sharing of diagnosis and prognosis kasi nga mapagpaplanuhan na ng pasyente what kind of end-of-life care they want for themselves. Na pag-isipan na niya yan, na ipagdasal na niya, na consult na niya yung pamilya niya. Okay? Anything else?
Doc, pwede po kami makahingi ng PowerPoint presentation po ng lecture for today.
Sure. No problem. Sige. Okay, so I actually put here my resources para lang if you want to check out the original, the sources mismo, lagi namang mas maganda yung gano'n. Okay? So if you have no more questions, it's almost 3 o'clock and you have other subjects pa? Meron pa kayo?
Yes po. Yes po.
Okay, sige. So sige, i-upload na lang natin yung PowerPoint para ma-review nyo kasi basically doon naman manggagaling yung questions sa exams ninyo. Okay, sige. So I end this lecture already.
Thank you po, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.